What is up, guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens, or should I say Long Island, where we're visiting Andrew Sandler and Polo Reef. A little while ago, they came over for a visit to see my place, and during that visit, they invited me to be a panel speaker at an event at Polo Reef that they were hosting for their local Long Island Reef Club. Talk went well, but the real treat was having the opportunity to sit and talk with people that I've only really met in passing, like Jonathan from Country Critters, Joe from Long Island Aquarium, Bob from ESV, the folks from Reef Bright, many others. It's been a few months since my first visit to see Andrew's place, and so much has changed. For starters, some of my corals from Tidal Gardens are here, which is always a flattering concept. I mean, we're in the business of selling coral online, so you'd think a lot of people have our corals, but most of the time I don't get to see them in their new home. So that was a really cool feeling, especially when their new home is as crazy as the tanks here. The big 17,000 gallon aquarium is a lot more filled up since my first visit. I thought it was already pretty full, but between new additions and the growth of existing colonies, it makes it look a lot more packed in. The sort of things about this tank that I was most interested in were some of the infrastructure updates. I'm like a big infrastructure guy, if you didn't already know. The first thing to talk about was the additional flow. Designing a flow in any aquarium is a dynamic process. The needs of an aquarium vary with time as corals grow. I'm a huge fan of Abyss pumps, and Alex from Abyss visited Andrew's aquarium a couple of weeks before I did. I can already see some of their Abyss flow cannons, their AFC 150s, have made their way into the aquascape, and then onto this pole mount as well. I've got 2 of these pumps at Tidal Gardens, and they can move some serious flow. Last I heard, they were looking to use 4 of these AFC 150s and a couple of AFC 400s. That is in addition to everything else that they had going on, between returns, closed loops, and whatnot. It is such a challenge to provide good flow in large aquariums, and like I said before, it's a moving target. They're going to be needing even more in the future and have to get really creative with the design. The second infrastructure update that I took lots of interest in was this ozone setup. Since the last visit here, they replaced a unit that wasn't working and went with a commercial-sized unit from Ozotech. Technically 2 units from Ozotech. Shout out to the Ozotech guys. It took me forever to even try ozone on the systems back at home, and that was due in large part to having extensive talks with the Ozotech team about all the little technical questions that I had. Anyhow, I digress. The real thing I was interested in was this oxygen generator. So what the heck is an oxygen generator? I'll do the science no justice at all, but basically, this oxygen generator would solve all of the problems that I have with humidity. The ozone generators that we use are corona discharge, and they do not like humid air, because when you send humid air through the corona discharge device, this thing that actually is making ozone, the nitrogen in the air, in the presence of water, makes a deposit that over time gunks up that corona discharge device. That is why it's always recommended to use an air dryer of some sort. I can sort of get by with the humidity in the new building using a combination of dehumidifiers for the air as well as these air dryer units that we have sitting on the wall. But in my greenhouse, where the humidity is much higher, it's a total non-starter. Well, this oxygen generator could affect the math on that, because what it does is that in addition to drying out the air to some degree, it concentrates oxygen. And in essence, what it's doing is it's capturing the nitrogen, which is normally about 78% in the air, and then it replaces the bulk of that with oxygen, which is usually around 21%. It serves the dual purpose of preventing nitrogen gunk buildup in the presence of humidity, while also turbocharging the effectiveness of the ozone generator. Andrew had one here, and I wanted to see how they liked it, and I wanted to gauge how loud it was because I'm kind of a sound nut in my facility. On that second point, though, I could not tell because it was right next to a couple of giant protein skimmers that are screaming loud. But as for the functionality of the unit, it seems to be doing a really good job. They're not having any issues with the humidity, and to produce the amount of ozone that you would need on a tank this size, it's a lot to keep up with. So far they're loving it. One day, if I ever get serious about doing ozone in my greenhouse, one of these units will definitely be a consideration. The other massive difference between this visit and my last one is the lab area behind the tank got a major makeover. They really polished up this area with new floors, new cabinetry, a workbench bar area. It just looks so much more cleaned up and finished. It was unrecognizable from my first visit. I can't tell you how much of a difference this sort of thing makes in the day-to-day running of an operation. And it's especially true when you have a really complex system going on and a system that requires staffing. All kinds of things can go wrong in a disorganized place. But when everything is clean and nicely laid out, it makes it so much easier for everyone. I always say, it's not good enough for people to do the stuff correctly. It's about reducing the chance of one person doing something wrong, because in the business that we're in, that's all it takes. These sorts of upgrades might seem like they're purely cosmetic, but they really do serve a greater function. All right, let's move on to some of the tanks. In my last video here, I focused mainly on that big 17,000 gallon tank for obvious reasons, but there are many other tanks here. There are three that I would like to mention. The first tank that I wanted to talk about was this staging tank that is housing a lot of LPS that they're collecting. There are several holding tanks that have been set up in this lab area, and I think they're kind of like long-term quarantine systems. But they're also nice displays in their own right. There was one that had a lot of SPS in it, with just a few LPS sprinkled in there, and then there was one that was really packed with LPS. I'm not sure where these corals are going to end up. Some might make it into the big tank, but Polo Reef has a lot of smaller displays in the works, and many of these corals might find a home in those tanks. I am biased towards this LPS tank in particular, because there are a bunch of corals from Tidal Gardens in this tank that Andrew and the staff had picked out when they visited. I will point out just a few that I saw right away. First, there is this huge chalice right here in the front. He got some Alveopora, and then there's these two amazing Acanthophilia. I thought these were super special when I first saw them. One was this like war paint pattern, but it has gold flake speckles throughout. It was a good 10 inches in diameter when fully expanded, and one of the guys that works here said his eyes nearly popped out of his head when he first unbagged it. It was so nice. The second Acanthophilia has like this really nice deep purple base, but then has these bright orange spots. I love both of these, and I'm so happy that they're here. Lastly, he picked up our signature glitter bomb Goniopora. I've been loving Goniopora for a while now, and this is one of the top 3 varieties that we have growing. I can't wait to see this thing fully grow out into a large colony, because at the farm, they only get so big before we propagate it. I think it'll look spectacular in about a year when it takes up a lot more space and makes an even bigger visual impact. One tank that is a major work in progress is in Andrew's office. This thing has a ton of potential. It is a 2,500 gallon tank, and besides being incredibly large, it has this really cool motorized front for easy access from both sides. I guess easy access is probably not the best choice of words, but guys, if you ever decide to get a tank this size, being able to access it from as many sides as possible is really important. And most of the time, a hobbyist with a normal sized aquarium would just have a canopy that could just lift up a door or something. But once you get really big, the motorized equipment makes more and more sense. And besides, it's really cool. I don't know what the timetable for this tank is. It's been running water, circulation, and a protein skimmer and live rock for months now, but I imagine it's getting close to showtime. I wonder if the corals that were in the holding tanks are going to make their way into this one and be more of an LPS dominated reef, or a complete other direction and be an even more Acropora dominated tank, more so than the big show tank. The big show tank has like a really eclectic mix of everything. It looks like it's all acros, but there's a ton of other stuff in there. So I'm wondering if this one will be like all acros. In any case, it'll be really interesting to check back on this tank because the bones and infrastructure that's here, it's all set up to make a really spectacular display. The last tank that I'm going to talk about is this 200-gallon tank. It sits right next to the big 17,000-gallon reef, and one day will be replaced by a 900-gallon drop-off tank. I really love this tank because it is such a nice collection of large polyp stony corals. And nice is also a poor choice of words because this might be the nicest collection of large polyp stony corals I've ever seen. If I had to choose a personal style of tank, it would probably be something like this. Lately, I've been gravitating towards these lower light, deep water LPS tanks. There are so many cool LPS out there, and this tank in particular has a collection of some of the nicest color morphs. I am so into this selection of Homophilia australis, the Scolies, and Homophilia bowerbanki. This bowerbanki in particular is the nicest one I've ever seen. And I wonder if it's the actual item that some of the guys in the coral selling community have been talking about. I'll go on a little aside journey, okay? So one of the other coral collectors that I talked to, he got a frag of this kind of bowerbanki. And when he talked to the collector overseas, I think they wanted something insane for it. I think they wanted like $50,000 at the collector level, which if you know anything about like the coral selling market, it's beyond insane. But he got one little frag of it, and then he's saving that, and eventually I'll get one little frag of it. But here I am, and I think I'm looking at the entire thing in front of me. If it's not that exact piece, it is really close. Anyway, I don't know if I can make a show tank like this at Tidal Gardens. As much as I would love to, obviously, the stuff in it would eventually get sold out. Who knows though? Maybe when the industry starts to focus on spawning these types of LPS that can't really be propagated at the commercial scale, there will be some incentive to hang on to the best color morphs for in-house breeding programs. And then finally, I can have an LPS show tank of my dreams. All right, that's about it from this visit. Thanks again, Polo Reef, for having us over. It's always great to spend time with Andrew and the crew, and I can't wait to see how all of these projects progress. Till next time, happy reefing.